Wings Against Doubt, the Black American pilot of the Eastern Front, arrival and skepticism. The biting wind of the Soviet winter whipped through Captain James Mitchell's greatcoat, a stark contrast to the humid air of North Africa, where he had last flown. He stepped out of the transport plane, his breath immediately fogging in the frigid air. The landscape was a canvas of bleak white and gray, dotted with makeshift hangars and the skeletal outlines of trees. This was the Eastern Front, 1943, a place synonymous with unimaginable brutality and a desperate fight for survival. Jim was a man of quiet determination, his face etched with the experiences of 2 years in the air, first over the desert sands, now facing the ice-bound skies of Russia. His skin, a rich ebony, stood out against the pallor of the snow, and the uniform he wore, a Soviet-issued flight suit, a concession to the Lend-Lease agreement that brought him here. But underneath, his American sensibilities remained. He was an anomaly, a Black American pilot, sent by a nation still grappling with its own racial divisions, to fight alongside a people who knew little of him or his kind, but were united by a common enemy. A hulking figure, bundled in a thick sheepskin coat, approached him. This was Commander Volkov, the stern-faced leader of the 812th Fighter Aviation Regiment. Volkov's eyes, as cold and gray as the Siberian sky, raked over Jim, assessing, judging. Beside him stood Alexei Petrov, a younger pilot, handsome but with a wary, almost hostile glint in his gaze. Captain Mitchell. Volkov's voice was a low growl, thick with a Russian accent. "Welcome to Zhukovo." The welcome was devoid of warmth. "Commander Volkov," Jim responded, his voice clear and measured, extending a gloved hand. Volkov took it briefly, his grip firm but perfunctory. "We were told you are experienced," Volkov continued, his eyes narrowing. "An American pilot. From North Africa." The skepticism in his tone was thinly veiled. Jim could feel the weight of it, a familiar burden he had carried his entire life, amplified now by the harsh realities of war and foreign soil. "Yes, Commander. I have over 200 combat hours, with 12 confirmed kills against the Luftwaffe," Jim stated, his voice betraying no emotion. He had learned long ago that cold, hard facts were often the only currency that mattered when facing prejudice. Alexei snorted softly, a sound that Volkov ignored but Jim did not miss. It was a challenge, a dismissal. Jim knew what they saw: an outsider, a man of different color, speaking a different language, from a different world. They saw potential weakness, an unknown quantity in a fight where every variable could mean life or death. 12 kills, Volkov repeated slowly, as if weighing the words, finding them wanting. "This is the Eastern Front, Captain, not North Africa. The German pilots here, they are different. Our skies are different." "I understand, Commander," Jim replied, his gaze unwavering. "I am here to fight the common enemy, just like your men. My skills translate across any front." Before Volkov could respond, a smaller, wiry man with grease-stained hands emerged from a nearby hangar, wiping his brow with a rag. This was Ivan, a senior ground crew mechanic. He approached with an air of genuine curiosity. "Ah, the American pilot, Captain Mitchell, yes? We hear you fly the P-39, a good machine though. Temperamental for our conditions," Ivan said, a slight smile on his face, the first genuine human warmth Jim had encountered. "That's right, Ivan," Jim nodded, appreciating the mechanic's directness. "She's a tough bird, and I've flown her in worse." Volkov cleared his throat, his expression signaling the end of pleasantries. "Ivan, prepare Captain Mitchell's aircraft. He will be flying a patrol tomorrow with Lieutenant Petrov as his wingman. A simple reconnaissance, get him acquainted with the sector." Alexei stiffened at the mention of his name. "Commander, with all due respect, I am scheduled." "You are scheduled for whatever I order, Lieutenant," Volkov cut him off sharply. "This is an order. Consider it an evaluation, for both of you." Alexei's jaw tightened, but he offered no further protest. He shot Jim a venomous look before turning sharply and walking back towards the barrack. The message was clear: Jim was an unwelcome assignment, a burden. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the snow in hues of deep blue and purple, Jim found himself alone for a moment, observing the bay. The roar of distant artillery served as a constant reminder of the war's proximity. He felt the chill not just from the wind, but from the silent judgment of his new comrades. It was a familiar battle, one he had fought countless times, but never with such high stakes. He remembered the words his grandmother often recited, a whisper from his childhood that echoed across oceans and years. Be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. It was a silent prayer, a personal anthem against the doubt that swirled around him, thicker than any fog. He closed his eyes for a moment, a deep breath steadying him. He would prove his worth, not with words, but with the roar of his engine and the precision of his. If you found Captain Mitchell's journey compelling, subscribe to our channel for more tales of courage and resilience. The pre-dawn chill permeated the hangar, making the metal of Jim's P-39 Airacobra feel like a block of ice. Ivan and his crew worked diligently, their breath pluming in the artificial light, checking every rivet and fuel line. Jim stood by, observing, occasionally offering a specific detail about his plane's quirks learned from countless hours in the cockpit. Ivan listened intently, a respect for the machine and its pilot evident in his movements. She's ready for you, Captain, Ivan grunted, giving the propeller a final spin. The old girl has seen many battles. She trusts you. Jim smiled faintly, a rare expression. And I trust her. Alexei approached, his usual grim expression softened slightly by the darkness. He carried his flight helmet under his arm. Ready, Captain Mitchell? He asked, his tone still reserved, but lacking the outright hostility of yesterday. As I'll ever be, Lieutenant, Jim replied, pulling on his own leather helmet. The briefing had been sparse, a routine patrol over a contested supply route, nothing more than a simple reconnaissance. Volkov's instructions had been clipped, his gaze still holding a flicker of suspicion. It was clear he expected Jim to perform, but he was prepared for him to fail. The P-39's engine coughed to life with a thunderous roar, shaking the cold air. Jim taxied onto the icy runway, Alexei's Yak-9 following close. The Eastern Front's airfields were often crude, barely leveled strips of frozen earth, making every takeoff a test of nerve and skill. Jim's takeoff was smooth, the heavy fighter lifting gracefully into the gray dawn. Alexei, watching from his cockpit, conceded inwardly that the American possessed a certain finesse. They climbed steadily, the world below a monochrome blur of snow and forest. Jim maintained a disciplined patrol pattern, scanning the skies with an intensity born of experience. He knew that complacency was a pilot's deadliest enemy. The silence of the radio, save for the occasional crackle of static, was both comforting and unnerving. Suddenly a flicker on the horizon, too small, too fast to be a bird. Jim's eyes, trained by years of hunting and being hunted, locked onto it. Alexei, I have bogeys, 12 o'clock high, he barked into his radio, his voice calm, authoritative. Alexei, though startled, responded instantly. Confirm, Captain. 3. No, 4 Messer. His voice trailed off as he recognized the distinctive shapes of Messerschmitt Bf 109s, German fighters, notorious for their speed and climbing ability. They were outnumbered. Maintain formation. Stay tight. I'll take lead, Jim commanded, pushing his P-39 into a steeper climb, surprising Alexei with his aggressive maneuver. The German pilots, likely expecting an easy target, split their formation, 2 peeling off for a head-on pass, the other 2 circling for an attack from above. Break right, Jim yelled, yanking his stick over. The P-39 groaned, but responded, narrowly avoiding a burst of cannon fire that raked the air where they had been moments before. He saw Alexei struggling to keep up, his Yak-9's less powerful engine strained. Jim's mind raced, analyzing the geometry of the fight. He knew the P-39 was heavier than the nimble 1009s, but it was robust and had a formidable 37mm cannon in its nose. He pulled into a tight turn, using the P-39's lower speed to his advantage, forcing an overshoot from one of the pursuing Messerschmitts. He got a clean shot, a short, precise burst. The 37mm shell tore into the German fighter's wing root, sending it spinning out of control, a plume of black smoke marking its descent. 1 down. Alexei's voice was a mix of shock and exhilaration. The remaining 3 Mono 9s regrouped, more cautious now. They hadn't expected such a fierce defense, especially from a single P. Jim, however, wasn't just defending, he was hunting. He saw one Mono 9 trying to get on Alexei's tail. Without hesitation, Jim executed a daring maneuver, a violent half-roll and dive, placing himself directly between Alexei and the enemy. The Messerschmitt pilot, caught off guard, broke off his attack. "Alexei, brake hard left, now!" Jim shouted, simultaneously pouring lead into the German fighter that had been on Alexei's tail. A string of .50-caliber rounds raked across its fuselage, and its engine sputtered, trailing white smoke before it, too began a controlled descent, attempting to limp back to its line. The remaining two German fighters, perhaps unnerved by the sudden loss of two of their comrades to a single P-39, decided the engagement was no longer favorable. They turned and fled, their shapes shrinking rapidly against the eastern sky. Their retreat, Alexei exclaimed, his voice filled with a disbelieving awe. "Captain, you saved me." Jim didn't respond immediately, his breathing heavy, adrenaline coursing through him. He checked his instruments, assessed their position. "Affirmative, Lieutenant, let's return to base. Report enemy position." Back on the ground, the news of the engagement spread like wildfire. 2 confirmed kills, 2 German fighters driven off, and not a scratch on Jim or Alexei's planes. Volkov listened to Jim's concise report, his expression unreadable. But when Alexei, usually so reserved, began to recount Jim's daring maneuvers with an uncharacteristic enthusiasm, a grudging respect began to soften the commander's stern features. "He maneuvered like a demon, Commander," Alexei admitted, his eyes wide. "He put himself between me and the enemy. He saved my life." Ivan clapped Jim on the shoulder, a wide grin breaking through his usual stoicism. "I told you she was a good machine, Captain, and you are a master." Jim felt a small victory, a faint warmth against the cold skepticism, but he knew this was just one flight, one skirmish. The true fight for respect, for acceptance, had only just begun. The seeds of doubt had been sown in the minds of his new comrades, but now, a different kind of doubt might just be taking root, a doubt that he wasn't capable. Enjoying Captain Mitchell's story? Hit the like button to show your support. The spring thaw of 1944 brought with it a renewed ferocity to the Eastern Front. The mud, a thick, clinging enemy in itself, made ground movements treacherous, but the skies became the main theater for decisive action. German forces, though pushed back, still held strategic strongholds, and the battle for air superiority was critical. Rumors of a particularly lethal Luftwaffe ace, Hans Richter, a man credited with over 60 kills, began to circulate, instilling a fresh wave of apprehension among the Soviet pilots. Jim Mitchell, now undeniably an integral part of the A-12, felt the increased tension. His flying skills were no longer questioned, but his leadership was now being tested. He often flew lead, Alexei faithfully on his wing, their bond forged in the crucible of shared combat. Volkov, while still demanding, had shed much of his initial skepticism, consulting Jim on tactics, relying on his unique perspective. Today's mission was vital, providing close air support for a desperate ground assault aimed at retaking a key rail junction, a lifeline for German supply lines. The stakes were impossibly high. Losing air cover would mean catastrophic losses for the ground troops. The briefing room was tense. Maps were spread across tables, marked with arrows and strategic points. Volkov's voice, usually a monotone, carried an edge of urgency. "The enemy will throw everything they have at us. Reconnaissance indicates heavy fighter patrols in the sector. Richter and his squadron are known to operate there." Jim nodded, a grim set to his jaw. He had heard the stories of Richter, the Black Knight of the Eastern Front. He knew this would be his ultimate test. As they geared up, Alexei approached Jim, a rare nervousness in his usually confident demeanor. "Captain, I'd been practicing that high yo-yo maneuver you showed me. Do you think it will be useful against Richter?" Jim clapped him on the shoulder. "It's a good move, Alexei, but against Richter, expect the unexpected. Trust your instincts, and trust your wingman. We stick together no matter what." The P-39s and Yak-9s roared off the frozen runway, a squadron of mixed fighters, a testament to the desperate alliance against a common foe. As they approached the rail junction, the ground erupted in flashes of artillery fire. Smoke billowed into the sky, a dark pall over the conflict. "Contact," Bogies, 11 o'clock high, at least 8 of them, a voice crackled over the radio, too many, too fast. They were heading straight into an ambush. It's Richter. Alexei's voice was strained. I see his markings. Jim identified Richter's distinctive Messerschmitt Bf 109, adorned with a black falcon emblem, leading the charge. Richter was an aggressive, calculating pilot, and he had obviously anticipated their arrival. The German fighters dived, a swarm of deadly hornets. Break hard left, everyone. Don't let them split us, Jim commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. He twisted his P-39 into a bone-jarring corkscrew, dodging a stream of cannon fire. The air was suddenly thick with tracers, the whine of engines, and the desperate shouts over the radio. Jim found himself in the midst of a swirling dogfight, a ballet of death in the clouds. He saw Alexei engaged with two 1009s, struggling. Jim, despite being pursued himself, executed a daring split S, dropping out of the fight only to pull up sharply beneath Alexei's attackers. His 37mm cannon roared, a devastating blow to one of the 109s which disintegrated mid-air. The second, startled, broke off its attack, giving Alexei a chance to regroup. Thank you, Captain, Alexei yelled, his voice ragged. Then Jim spotted him, Hans Richter. The German ace was skillfully cutting through the Soviet formation, a predator in his element. Richter was aiming for the flight leader Jim, trying to break the command structure. Jim knew this was his moment. I've got Richter, Jim announced, peeling off towards the Black Falcon. The duel was a masterclass in aerial combat. Richter was incredibly skilled, anticipating Jim's moves, constantly trying to gain an advantage. He used the 109's superior climb rate to try and get above Jim, then dived, unleashing bursts of fire. Jim countered with the P-39's ruggedness, and his own uncanny ability to turn tightly at lower speeds, forcing Richter to overshoot, or to abandon his pursuit. The two planes danced across the sky, leaving vapor trails in their wake, a deadly pasted. Jim remembered his grandmother's words, "For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." He thought not of divine intervention, but of the strength, courage and resolve those words had instilled in him, giving him the mental fortitude to push past fear, to trust his training, to believe in himself when others doubted. This wasn't just about survival, it was about proving that excellence knew no bounds, no color, no nationality. After what felt like an eternity, Jim finally saw an opening. Richter, momentarily distracted by another Soviet fighter, pulled a tight turn. Jim, anticipating the move, cut inside his arc, lining up a perfect shot. He squeezed the trigger. The 37mm cannon barked, followed by the chatter of his machine guns. Rounds ripped into Richter's engine cowling. A burst of flame erupted, and Richter's 109 shuddered, its distinctive falcon emblem now obscured by smoke. Richter, though hit, was not out. He executed a desperate roll and dive, trying to disengage, his plane trailing a thick black plume. Jim pursued, scoring more hits, until the damaged 109 plummeted towards the snow-covered earth, a fiery comet. Jim watched it impact, a silent explosion, a final punctuation mark on a long-standing rivalry. The rest of the German squadron, their ace defeated, lost heart. They scattered, fleeing the battle. The sky, moments ago a maelstrom, slowly returned to a relative calm, punctuated by the distant sounds of ground combat. The remaining Soviet fighters, bruised but victorious, regrouped around Jim. On their return to Zhukovo, the ground crew, led by an overjoyed Ivan, rushed out to meet them, cheering. Volkov, usually stoic, waited by the runway. As Jim climbed out of his cockpit, the commander walked over, his face etched with a mix of relief and profound respect. He extended his hand, not formally but with a warmth Jim had never seen. "Captain Mitchell," Volkov said, his voice thick with emotion, "you saved this operation. You saved my men." His grip was firm, a true comrade's handshake. "You have earned our respect, Captain. All of." Alexei, standing beside Volkov, clapped Jim on the back, a wide, genuine smile on his face. "Richter gone. You are a legend, Jim." Jim looked at the faces around him, the exhaustion, the relief, the open admiration, the prejudice, the doubt, the skepticism. They had been shattered, not by words, but by the roar of his engine and the courage of his spirit. He was no longer just an American outsider, he was Captain Mitchell, an ace, a hero of the Eastern Front. What are your thoughts on Captain Mitchell's incredible bravery? Leave a comment below. The victory at the rail junction marked a significant turning point, not only for the Soviet advance, but also for Captain James Mitchell. He was no longer just the American pilot, he was Captain Mitchell, a revered ace, a leader and a brother in arms. The initial frosty skepticism had melted away like the winter snow, replaced by a deep camaraderie forged in the crucible of shared battle. Throughout 1944 and into 1945, Jim continued to fly, pushing back the relentless German war machine. He participated in numerous critical operations, from covering strategic ground offensives to intercepting long-range bombers. His P-39, maintained meticulously by Ivan and his crew, became almost an extension of himself, dancing through flak and dodging enemy fighters with a grace that belied its robust frame. Alexei Petrov remained his loyal wingman, their unspoken communication in the air a testament to their profound trust. They often flew the most dangerous missions, facing overwhelming odds, always emerging victorious. Hans Richter, though severely damaged and forced down in their last encounter, had survived. He had reappeared weeks later, flying with renewed vengeance, determined to exact his revenge on the pilot who had bested him. Their subsequent encounters became legendary within. Each dogfight was a tense, drawn-out affair, a clash between two master pilots, but each time, Jim's superior tactical awareness and relentless pursuit ensured he gained the upper hand. Richter was eventually grounded after his third encounter with Jim, his plane too damaged and his nerve perhaps finally broken by the repeated defeats. The Black Knight had been vanquished, his legend eclipsed by the Black American, a testament to Jim's unwavering skill. The impact of Jim's presence extended beyond the cockpit. He often shared his experiences from other fronts, his tactical insights, and even aspects of American culture with the Soviet pilots. He learned rudimentary Russian, and they in turn picked up English phrases. The mess hall, once a place of quiet observation for Jim, now buzzed with laughter and animated conversations, with Jim at the center of many discussions. Ivan, the pragmatic ground crew chief, would boast about Jim's magic touch with the P-39 to anyone who would listen. The younger pilots looked up to him, not just for his kills, but for his calm demeanor under pressure and his unwavering courage. As 1945 dawned, the tide of the war had irrevocably turned. The Soviet armies pushed westward, liberating cities and driving the Germans back to their homeland. The air battles, though still fierce, became less frequent, the Luftwaffe's strength dwindling rapidly. Finally, the news everyone yearned for arrived. Germany had surrendered. The celebrations at Jakovo were muted, tinged with the sorrow of countless losses, but also a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. Jim stood with Volkov, Alexei and Ivan, watching the red flags flutter triumphantly. They had faced the darkness together and emerged victorious. A few weeks later, Jim received orders for his return to the United States. His tour of duty was over. The farewell was bittersweet. Volkov, his hardened features softened by shared history, embraced Jim like a son. "Captain Mitchell," he said, his voice thick, "you came here an outsider. You leave here a hero. You showed us that courage and skill know no uniform, no border, no color. Your legacy here, it will not be forgotten." Alexei, his eyes moist, clasped Jim's hand. "My brother," he whispered, "I will never forget. You taught me so much. You saved my life, many times. Fly safe, always." Ivan, practical as ever, had polished Jim's flight helmet to a shine. "Come back someday, Captain," he said. "We'll have a P-39 waiting for you, ready to fly just like old times." As Jim boarded the transport plane that would take him away from the war-torn lands of the Eastern Front, he looked back at the faces of the men he had fought alongside. He had arrived amidst profound skepticism, an unfamiliar face in a desperate war. He had proven himself not through rhetoric, but through excellence, through courage and through a willingness to stand firm in the face of adversity. The words his grandmother had spoken years ago, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go," resonated in his heart. They had anchored him through the storms of war and doubt, and now, looking back, he understood their full weight. He had been strong, he had been courageous, and the Lord had indeed been with him, guiding his wings against doubt and into the heart of respect. He carried with him not just the scars of war, but the immense satisfaction of having broken barriers, of having forged bonds that transcended prejudice,
and of leaving a legacy that spoke volumes without ever uttering a word. Captain James "Jim" Mitchell, the Black American pilot, had soared above the Eastern Front, a beacon of excellence, shattering perceptions and leaving an indelible mark on the hearts of those who fought beside him. Want to stay updated with more incredible stories like Captain Mitch? Subscribe to our channel again and never miss an update.